This last year, I met my reading goal of 50 books. Here are my top 10 reads of 2025. In the 10th spot, we have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I listened to the audiobook of this, as most people suggest. I've definitely been interested in it after hearing all of the rave reviews about it. I did really enjoy the movie The Martian, and I'm very much looking forward to the adaptation of this starring Ryan Gosling. But I'd never read anything by Andy Weir before, and I'm not generally a science fiction person, although you'll see that changed a little bit this year. However, it was my childhood best friend Katie that finally convinced me that I needed to give this a try. And the audiobook was just as wonderful as everyone has talked about. Without spoiling anything, there's definitely a character, a couple of moments when specific sounds are needed, and getting that in an audiobook format is just so much more satisfying than coming up with it in your head, in my opinion. Much like The Martian, Project Hail Mary is about a man who finds himself stranded in space by himself. He's struggling with a lot of memory issues in whatever happened, and is trying to figure out why he's in space, what he's supposed to be doing with his time there, where all of his flight mates went, and what's waiting for him back at home that makes this Project Hail Mary. I absolutely adored the characters in this book. I would definitely say that was my favorite duo of the year, and I'm very excited to see it come to life in the film, which is out in a couple of months at this point, which is very exciting. I think what really made a difference to me with this being a science fiction novel is that it's much more about his emotional reaction to it. There is still a lot of science to it, but I did try to read The Martian later in the year, and I didn't like it as much because it was so much more science-based. And this book really concerns Ryland's emotional state and concerns the relationships that are necessary for him to succeed in this endeavor. And that will usually win me over, even if it's in a genre that I don't usually care about. There were also quite a few philosophical concepts discussed in this book that I wasn't expecting at all, that I really enjoyed. A few quotes. There's like, human beings have a remarkable ability to accept the abnormal and make it normal. It's a distinction level event. If anything, God's handing us the apocalypse. These concepts seem to really drive Ryland's character, and the author so accurately conveys those concepts to us as readers, even though they're very lofty, and it really makes us care about him wrestling with those subjects. And I was very intrigued and wanted to know what happened and couldn't put it down. I ultimately gave Project Hail Mary 4.5 stars. In 9th place is Grief is for People by Sloane Crosley. I adore Sloane Crosley. I've discussed her many times. The first time I read her was her novel Cult Classic, and I'm sure it will go on my favorites list the next time that I get to reread it. This is a memoir centered on her handling the loss of one of her closest friends, as well as a theft in her New York City apartment where all of her jewelry was stolen. This is such a great human structure for a memoir, and the idea that she can be grieving both of those things at the same time, and how much more intertwined they seem to be, even though maybe some people laughed at her for grieving her jewelry in the midst of this other very tragic thing that happened in her life. But Sloane, as always, just takes this in stride and finds a very humorous, very honest, to sometimes the point of being uncomfortable look at all of these topics, and with some amazing quotes to boot. My favorite quote from Grief is for People is, "But what they do not understand is that if I do not capture what I have lost, it will be like losing it twice." While she was on book tour, Sam got to meet her first in Savannah and had some of my books signed by her, and then I got to meet her in Los Angeles and I had some books signed for Sam. And I just will read everything that she ever comes out with. I will read everything that Sloane ever comes out with. I just get something about the way that she communicates about life and love. And I highly recommend if you're a fan of Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking, which I know is a very aspirational comparison, but I mean it. I think a lot of the same lessons and characterizations of grief can be found from Sloane. Highly recommend. I also gave Grief is for People 4.25 stars. Number 8 on my list is I Remain in Darkness by Annie Ernaux. I have started working my way through all of her novel, memoir, essay collections, and I really adore her writing. It is so brutally honest to the point of sometimes you're like, should you have said that out loud? And while that can feel a little too provocative at times, it also is completely disarming and helps you feel like, okay, I'm not alone in these thoughts that I've had, especially in this one in particular. I Remain in Darkness is about Annie taking care of her mother, who is struggling with dementia towards the end of her life. And the way that just changes the way that you think about everything, but especially looking back on your memories of childhood and youth and growing up with this person, and how that can feel as though you're changing positions or places in life. This was a hard read, especially for anyone who knows someone who's struggling with Alzheimer's or dementia. It honestly made me much more fearful of being in those situations and being responsible for people that once took care of us. But it was also absolutely stunning and beautiful and heartbreaking, and so far my favorite of her works. I dog-eared a couple of things. I feel like crying when I see how badly she needs my love because I cannot satisfy her demand. I loved her so desperately as a child. I rated I Remain in Darkness 5 stars. Number 7 on my list is Bitter Water Opera by Nicolette Polack. This little book was such a pleasant surprise. I picked it up from a bookstore because the cover design is just everything I have ever wanted. I think it's absolutely stunning, and I thought that it was a classic, and it is not. It was just published a couple of years ago, but I sat down one afternoon and I read the entire thing in one sitting, and I am so in love with it. Bitter Water Opera is, again, kind of that mishmash between a novel and a memoir, which I'm just finding more and more that I absolutely adore. This is about a modern woman who is dealing with a couple of different types of heartbreak, and she starts studying the work of Martha Beckett, who was an artist and a dancer in the 60s. Martha started a theater in Death Valley Junction, which I would now love to go to and see in person. And our modern woman, Gia, goes there to study her and superimposes Martha as almost like a guide of some sort as she goes through these heartbreaks. And it becomes unclear which parts are supposed to be really truly happening and what parts are just her coping mechanisms. As always, my favorite books of the year will have lots of good quotes. One of my favorites was, "At night, I drive on the highway. I pull towards the exits that go somewhere far. I switch lanes, but never end up leaving. I cannot bring myself to leave the things that make me small." I gave Bitter Water Opera 4.25 stars. Number 6 on my list is Berlin by B. Seton. I had never heard a word of this book before and saw the cover and loved it and bought it, and then it sat on my shelf for a couple of years. I am so glad that I gave it a shot and still picked it up because I could not put this book down. Berlin fits in the Hot Mess Express category. This is a young woman who moves to Berlin for the first time and finds herself completely trapped between what's really happening, the reality of the situation, and her paranoia and the dramatics with which she approaches her life. You will be confused and befuddled by what is really happening in real life and what she's imagining. And that can be frustrating and it can be done poorly. But I found this to be so enticing, and I would love for more people to give it a try so that I have someone to talk to about it. My review that I wrote on my little post-it note is, "Too many completely relatable things coming out of a terrible person's mouth. Send help." I worried that I'd sidestep my destiny in a way fate would find displeasing. I gave Berlin 4.5 stars. Number 5 is Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. We're going a little backwards, if you can imagine what a couple of the books later will be. But this is number 3 in the Dune series. I never ever thought that I would be so into these, but I loved the movies, wanted to know a little bit more about the books, and I'm on number 4 now. And the other 2 books are also in my top 10 of the year. I was not expecting this at all. However, I can fully give credit to the way that Frank Herbert writes, which is so modern. And I was confused about it the entire time I was reading, because these were written in the 60s and 70s, I believe. And not only are they completely relatable to the state of the world today and the themes that I think have been circling everyone's minds the last couple of years, but also just like the way in which he writes it's just so modern. I don't know how else to explain it. It didn't take a lot to get into any of these books, because although they're considered classics, they're not plagued by that heavy language that you have to figure out how to sort through. I would say the only thing that was confusing about these books was having to sort out who's who and the political systems and like the systems within the science fiction genre. I didn't feel totally confused by those, just because I've seen the movies so many times. So if you love the movies, I do think that that's an easy way to start getting into these books. I know I would have been completely confused by them if I hadn't seen the movies, but my God, I love these so much. And besides a quote, we'll leave the rest of the thoughts to the other 2 books coming later. My favorite section of the book that made me sit there and go, oh my God, I love books so much. For a time, he amused himself by reviewing Chaucer's route from London to Canterbury. It gave him a sense of timeless buoyancy to know that few in his universe would recall Chaucer or know any London. Some things were preserved in a book, but Canterbury was gone from the memories of men, as was the planet which had known it. There lay the burden of his memories, of all those lives which threatened to engulf him. He had made that trip to Canterbury once. I gave Children of Dune 4.5 stars. I promised there would be more. In 4th place, Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert. Dune Messiah is second in the Dune series, and I would say the one that I loved the most in its language and the themes that it focused on. It was much more similar to the kind of stuff that I would read outside of the science fiction genre. I am so incredibly excited to see them turn this into a movie. There are some characterizations in here that I have thought about once a week since I read this at the beginning of the year. I wrote in my summary in my little book review, the manipulation of religion and politics in the first novel shifts to sexual politics and relationships. So I really loved the shift in focus in this one, and it's much shorter than the other 2. What quotes did Frankie leave us with in this one? His prophetic visions had been eavesdropping on eternity for such a long while. I could go on and on, clearly. My other main note from this particular book is that there is a scene that made my stomach churn. I was reading it late at night one night, and I had to put the book down after this and go to sleep. I had to take a break from it, and I am so interested to see if they put that in the movie. And I know that is very vague, but it was just absolutely abhorrent. And I think that it's necessary to completely understand Paul's journey as a character, especially when people are so quick to love him and forgive him, probably mostly because he is played by Timmy. And I cannot wait to go on the ride with his character changing. So with that, I will leave it at, I rated Dune Messiah 4.75 stars. In 3rd place, we have Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is the 5th book in the Hunger Games series. These books meant so much to me growing up, as they did to so many people. And Haymitch was one of my absolute favorite characters. And so I did a reread of the whole series, as well as a first read of the 4th book for the first time. so that I could get to Hey Mitch's book. If this book did not make me sob my eyes out, I do not know if I have ever cried so hard in a book. And that is all because of Suzanne Collins. She has only gotten wiser and more scarily intelligent, both the older I've gotten, but also as the world has changed since these came out 15 going on 20 years ago. I will mourn everything that Hey Mitch went through for a good long while. And there is in particular like a metaphor, a literary device of sorts in this book that I have thought about legitimately almost every single day since I finished reading it. She's brilliant, and I now cannot wait for the film adaptation. I gave Sunrise on the Reaping 4.75 stars. In second place is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I love this book so much. I recommended it to so many people. I've bought it for so many people. This is an essay collection by the author of The Fault in Our Stars and Paper Towns, My Beautiful Hoosier, and I just love this man so much, and he should be protected at all costs. This essay collection is organized as just like things that John Green wanted to talk about that range from Diet Dr. Pepper to the Indy 500 to The Great Gatsby, and he just chats about them. And then at the end of the section, he rates them on like a scale out of 5, and he'll be like, I give sneezing 4.5 stars. I don't actually know that that's one of them, but I will be rereading this for the rest of my life. He just gives people so much joy and hope. I highly recommend listening to it as well. I listened to it and read it at the same time so I could underline everything, because he just has such a wonderful voice. There is one chapter in particular that is about Auld Lang Syne, the song that everyone sings at New Year's, that hearing it in his voice, I literally it's gonna make her cry just thinking about it. I literally sat down on the floor of my kitchen listening to it and cried. And he just has such a way about him of bringing people together, and I'm very thankful for him. And now I'm crying about John Green again. Every single person that I've given this to has absolutely loved it. Out of my whole stack of books, this is the one that I recommend the most. One of the strange things about adulthood is that you are your current self, but you are also all the selves you used to be, the ones you grew out of but can't quite ever get rid of. I gave The Anthropocene Reviewed 5 stars. And last but not least, my favorite book of the year was Dune by Frank Herbert. No one saw this coming, okay? And I didn't see it coming either, I swear. As I said, most of that is because of how Frank Herbert writes and the themes that he is dealing with. I love his characterizations. I love his use of discussion of religion. I could just drink in the quotes from this all day long. I look forward to rereading it and continuing the series, even though I've heard that it only gets worse after the 3rd book. And I am so incredibly happy that I gave this a shot, even though it is so far out of my comfort zone. And I hope that this serves as a reminder to myself in the future to continue to do so. The whole universe sat there, open to a man who can make the right decisions. I hope that we learn from this book and from Suzanne Collins, and for the romantics in us, also from John Green. I gave Dune 5 stars. Those are my top 10 reads from 2025. It was an absolutely amazing reading year. I had so many 5 stars. I started off the year with 5 stars right in a row. I found so many new favorites, so many new favorite quotes, and as always, I am just incredibly romantically thankful that books exist.